Hello, this is Alex Williamson, and welcome to The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. You know, guys, for years I thought that you had to have all sorts of filtration in an aquarium. I always believed that, it was some debate between, do you have a big enough canister filter? Do you use sponge filters? Do you use air stones? Or do you have a hang off the back? What is the answer? Are you doing airline filters, or do you have a pump of some sort, like a fountain out in a pond? And for me, the only question was, which kind do I need to use, and how much media do I need? Well, it turns out that the conversation is actually a whole lot simpler than that in some ways. And on the other hand, it's a lot more complex once you get into the science. But you can keep a robust and beautiful aquarium without any filtration. No electric filtration, no bubbling, nothing like that going on whatsoever. It is possible, and I'm going to explain to you how. There are two kinds of people that have figured this out. It's either completely on accident or years of experience and methodically working towards it and figuring out how to do it. So let's get into what that looks like. This aquarium clearly has a filter, but let's go downstairs and look at a couple that don't have one, and we'll talk about the difference and how you can set that up and what that will look like for you if you want to emulate that as well, and how a natural ecosystem can be established and flourish in your aquarium, even at a small size, even at 10 or 20 gallons, it's possible. All right, let's go downstairs and take a look. So, you guys have seen the setups that need filters, that need two filters, that need a light, that need a heater, that need CO2 for the plants to flourish, that need active substrate. This is common sense in our hobby these days. You go onto any forum board, if you want to grow high-tech plants, you're going to have the CO2, and there's some truth to that with some of the plants. Some of the animals need very specific conditions, very hot water for discus, for instance. However, common sense is not always so common, and sometimes we've been sold a false bill of goods. What is it that a lake or a pond or a river needs to thrive? Well, fast-moving river fish need things that other fish don't. And fast-moving river fish really do need a lot of times cool water, like trout and those kind of things, salmon, and oxygen, because they need that moving, rapid water to go through their gills and to feed them. However, other fish, like rice fish or guppies for that matter, there's guppies in here too, they don't need all of that stuff. And when you start to think about it, what is it that we are missing that we could supply into our aquariums that would allow us to get rid of our heater, for instance, to get rid of our air stone, our sponge filtration, even our hang off the back or a canister filter, whatever it may be? Could we get rid of the light? I don't know. So I started thinking, and it all started when I became one of the two people who have historically been able to pull this off. Now, here is a tank that was set up with an hang off the back filter and a heater. The heater's still technically on, but it's set to 72. And this light, even though it's an LED, puts out a little bit of heat, just a little. And this tank has been running for 5 years. At one point, it started getting clogged up. The filter back here got all gunked up with mud, debris, and, moss, duckweed, all sorts of stuff. And I let it because the fish looked happy. Now, what happened over time was I noticed that the water was getting a little bit cloudy, and I got worried. What could that mean? Usually it means that you have a bacteria bloom or die off, or an algae bloom. And I started going back and looking at other YouTubers, what they're doing, at pond fish, and looking at the wild and going over old books like Diane Walsted's Ecology of the Planted Aquarium and thinking about what is it that we're missing, because all of a sudden I had a tank that has rummy nose rasboras, danios, corridoras, tons of shrimp, snails, nearite snails and Malaysian trumpet snails, and substrate that should be depleted by now. Yet somehow this tank is doing fine, and I hadn't realized that after the filter got clogged, then it was just running from one side. It was the clogged side, and so it was just water just cycling and falling back out of this overflow. And I thought, okay, well, they need the oxygenation, surely. And, I don't have all the filtration, but maybe there's enough surface area in here that it's getting filtered. So I started doing research, and I found that when you have a strong enough light, that causes the plants to create enough oxygen in the day by taking that light and the nutrients in the soil or substrate that they can support even hill stream species. This Pandagara, look at his color. He's so happy in here. They're happy in this tank. In this 17.5 gallon tank, we have 8 of the pepper cories longfins. We have a group of the beautiful panda loaches, and then we have longfin danios, and more than that, we have the oftentimes delicate rummy nose rasbora or Sabwa splendens rasbora from Lake Inlay. So I started thinking, well, we got fish from all over the place. A lot of these are Southeast Asian fish, and some of them live in areas with monsoons. And I've got a good light on the tank, but now I don't have any, airflow really going on it well. And so one day I decided to see what would happen if I just did an experiment. I took the Pandagaras out at first, and I figured the rummy nose tetras could do okay. They'd be my guinea pig. They would be the canary in the coal mine. If they lost oxygen, I would know from them first, because the cories can go up for air and gulp, and some cyprinids can also do that. Some danios and things, and gouramis can live in really low oxygen water. So I thought that could be a fluke, right? Maybe kind of like goldfish. They can just live in extreme conditions. Well, it turns out that, of course, labyrinth fish like bettas and gouramis, they can totally breathe air, but cories can gulp it. But that's not what they're doing in this tank. They don't need to gulp it. They're still hanging out on the bottom in groups, still doing their thing with the shrimp and eating. And it's because even with the air filter turned off, the light is strong enough and the soil is nutrient enough, has enough nutrients, that at night the plants are going to release carbon. That's what they do, in the form of CO2. They're going to use most of the carbon that they sucked up in the day in respiration and transpiration, and they're sucking up water, they're sucking up carbon, and they're building with that. Now they need nutrients, so they need nitrates, they need potassium, they need iron, they need manganese, zinc, the trace elements. So if you have a substrate that still has those metals and important things in it, you can use root tabs to keep that in there, or powders like ADA's magic super powder. Their starting powder that they suggest you put in their substrate package. And I mean, beyond that, what if you just feed your fish a good diet and you have shrimp and snails, which break down plants and fish waste into smaller and smaller units? They may not eat the fish waste, but they take the usable things out of it. They're eating the carbon, they're eating the protein, they're eating the leftover starch, the leftover whatever. And as long as you've got those tiers of secondary digesters and tertiary or third level digesters, so that's going to be your snails and your planaria, a lot of people think are gross and they get rid of them, they're going to actually go to the bathroom and create mulm. Now, we've known for a long time that mulm is enough to actually kickstart a new tank. You don't need the filter media with the oxygen running through it. A lot of people think you need oxygen running through it like fast, like you need to see it moving. These fish are moving the water around. The temperature throughout the day in this room goes from, say, 67 at night to 72 in the day, or something like that on average. And that temperature change, the hot water rises, the cool water sinks. And that naturally happens. The plants naturally put out gases and water and actually heat. They're burning calories just like any other living form of life. And they will slowly move those things. Now, you may think that this is bad. Like, you're getting a level of all this dead stuff that's going to make ammonia and all that. Well, these little cleaning critters and in the cleaning crew, they're going through that and breaking it down. It's getting small enough that it can work its way down through the layers, down through the substrate. And if your substrate's thick enough, it begins to stratify, just like a lake bed. And this is the next key thing. So first we had that we need enough light for the plants to make enough oxygen that your surface area in your tank is your beneficial bacteria. That is your filter. So you know that you can have a hang off the back filter or a canister filter, but it needs the oxygen, right? That's what it needs for, and the surface area. We're always told that it needs surface area. You need all the little nooks and crannies on here for it to clean the bad bacteria, and then you need to do water changes. Well, I found in this tank it couldn't live without the filter. My nitrates started to spike and I had to call off the project, essentially. But that tank kept chugging along. And other tanks I had set up kept chugging along. Even the little ones. They had deep substrates. And this is something Father Fish, Diane Walstead, Lucas Bretz, lots of people have noticed this. And this is just my kind of twist on it, or my holistic, the whole ecology of the tank needs to be in place. But this stuff breaks down. Your Eco-Complete or your Amazonia ADA or Fluval Stratum, whatever it may be, dirt from the garden, that will break down, and the ammonia and the nitrates and nitrites break down and turn into their simplest compounds. Your plants use them, your plants grow, they either die and fall back into the system and it gets recycled, or you cut them or sell them and you remove that. So you're taking out ammonia and nitrates, things like that, whenever you remove a plant. Well, if you can get them to crest the water or float, then you're really in business, because they don't need to compete with a better quality light. So then we can knock off another element. So we knocked off the heater by just having the room at a subtropic temperature range, which if you don't have discus, fish like Medaka rice fish, like guppies, like bettas, they can stand 72 degrees. Now, is it ideal for spawning and things to keep them at closer to 74? Yes. So maybe just keep your room heated a couple degrees warmer if your tanks are mostly in one room. And then, in here again, we've got the snails and we've got shrimp and we've got surface area, and the mulm and all the little crags and cracks and spaces on here are the same as a sponge if you look at the entire container. And that bloom I was seeing in the other tank was not bacteria getting washed out of the hang off the back filter. It was actually water-borne bacteria. There are types of nitrifying bacteria that, yes, they need to colonize on surfaces, but just because they're 90% denser on a surface doesn't mean that they don't exist in the water also. So sometimes you'll see a cloudy look to the water, and as long as it's a clear cloudy look, that's either just tannins and a bacteria and fungi relationship, happens with fresh wood sometimes, or it's that bacteria living and dying and its bodies in the water. And that all falls down and gets recycled, and you start getting stratified layers. Now, you can see here that below this layer right here, it's gotten really dense within an inch. And here we see cyanobacteria, which usually needs light, but it can grow anoxically. It can grow without air. It can grow anaerobically, the bacteria. And what it can do is it can take nitrites and nitrates and it can turn it into ammonia. Now, plants actually eat ammonia a little bit better than they do nitrites and nitrates. It's just fish get poisoned by it, by the ammonia, and deal better with nitrates. So that's why we use nitrates more so in liquid fertilizers and additives. That's why on a high-tech tank, I'm adding liquid fertilizers in low amounts daily, and we're doing lots of water changes. And that allows the fish to not get poisoned. Well, in a tank like this, it's all getting trapped down below, and the bacteria is breaking it down and literally handing it to the roots. The roots need oxygen, so they're bringing oxygen with them, and they're breaking that up, and there's little pockets of nitrifying bacteria. There's little pockets. There's a dead snail right there. And these things are breaking down. Now, it may not be as, you may not have as much filtration area. Granted, these tanks have all of what was going on in the other tanks, plus these reservoirs of oxygen and all this surface area that's open right now so you can see. That's all colonized by good bacteria, and you know you don't want to get rid of that. You want to save that. But the substrate here has done the same thing. So as long as I keep my heavy metal nutrients and my micronutrients in these tanks, they are completely fine with that deep substrate, and we see that stratifying here too. So you can either do it from the start and just start slow. You get some shrimp and snails and you put those in and you barely feed them. You just have lots of plants and a good light, and you just let your tank go for a few months, no fish. And then you add a couple fish, check your nitrates. If they're fine, good. If they're high, do a water change. If they're really high, add a few more plants. And you can build it and build it and build it. And that's what I've done in those tanks over there. However, in this tank, it took pulling the plug and thinking, do I really need all the stuff they've sold me to keep these fish alive? Or is that just the quickest route, the easiest route? And now that this system's set up, I literally just feed it and top it off with water. There is a slight cloudiness, I will admit, on this one, and that's whenever the light is up very high. So it could be a slight algae, but I think it's more of a bacteria relationship, bacteria eating the nutrients in the water, something along those lines. I still need to learn. Maybe you know why, and you can put that in the comments. But I want you guys to think about other ways to keep your fish. I mean, they live in ponds and lakes, and yes, there are those species that will need extra help and this won't work for, but I'm not gravel vacuuming my tanks. I'm not puncturing this layer. It's like a cap. It's like paving the street over the sewer lines, over your septic tank, and it's not allowing it to come up, except for in the form of gas bubbles every once in a while. Methane, sulfur gases, and things like that. So once you've impregnated the soil with the iron and the sulfur that the anoxic bacteria likes, it can also make oxygen. So it starts making oxygen, as well as all the little surface areas here making oxygen, and all the plant surface areas. Now granted, at night the plants also let off their CO2, but it's a cycle that they let off more oxygen than CO2 over time, and they're eating the CO2 that the fish are expelling in waste and in breathing. And agitating the top of the water can help get them more oxygen, so sometimes getting fish that come and feed and hit the top of the water is a good idea, or create little currents. But you can see this tank, things are still moving. I have active fish in here. So with a little bit of planning, you can do some amazing things. And like I said, the two people I've seen pull it off are complete accidents where they don't know why their fish is still alive and it should be dead, and their filter's dead and their heater's gone, and it's green water algae, which green water tanks are excellent for fish. They love eating that green algae filled water almost most of the time. Means that plant life is flourishing and that the nitrates aren't too high in most aquariums. Now, farm runoff and things in the wild, it's different. But the other person is someone who does it intentionally and has studied these systems. So you want the substrate with a dense layer, a heavy layer at the bottom, with the anaerobic surface area, And then you want some sort of rich layer with nutrients for the plants. So, you know, something like the Eco Complete or soil from your yard or whatever it may be. It can have ammonia in it even. And then you need to cap it off. And if you wait patiently, silt from mulm will form like this. And this will allow you to actually have an aquarium that takes care of itself with its oxygen and its waste. It's just like a lake. It's an entire ecosystem. And we've been told that we need all these things, we need to pay all this money, when really we just need to give it the things it has from nature. And we need to have the different levels of creatures breaking things down and moving. And we need to give them food with things like calcium, magnesium, so that gets into the water. Live animals naturally have those things. They bioaccumulate it. And so do plants. So any critters eating your dead plants or like snails will also do that. And when they die, their shells and things, leave them in there. And by looking at this and studying the natural world a little more and having a good light so that all of it can be simulated like it's under the sun, you can actually keep tropical fish without a filter. So I'd love to know your tips, your opinions. I don't want to lecture you guys on what buttons to push or bells to ring, but if you guys enjoy this content, I appreciate you watching, your support, and I've got a lot more videos on all of this sort of stuff. So check it out, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.